Okay, let's go over the concept application question. For the most part, you guys did a really good job on this concept application question. I would say letter A, almost everybody hit on the head. I think letter C, for the most part, everybody kind of hit on the head. B, I would say, was, if there were problems, probably were they probably were in letter B for most of you. Now, there are certain things that I'm like, I think some people, if you didn't get the A or the C, I think some people maybe didn't kind of connect the circle, so to speak. And we're going to go over that in a second. So for the most part, go through and obviously read the scenario, kind of read what they're asking you. Make sure to read the question. I'm going to level with you. I went through and I started filming this video the first time. Didn't realize there was a second part to question A. They modified this from last year's exam, so I read it thinking like, hey, I've heard this one before. This is the letter A in last year. However, this part was letter B, so I answered it like it was letter A. Only when I went back and started filming did I realize, hey, there's a second part. So make sure you're clear and make sure you're answering what you're supposed to answer. They give you 15 minutes to answer this. I know a lot of people are like, hey, I had extra time. If you have extra time, you still have to wait for the clock to run out before you can submit your answer. Go back and reread the questions, reread your answers. Make sure you're answering these questions. AP grades you on what you get right, not what you get wrong. So sometimes throw another sentence in to clarify is a good idea. Make sure you kind of get that. All right, so the first one says, referencing the scenario, describe an action Congress could take to address the concerns of the interest group. Okay, let's deal with that part first. I put, Congress could pass a law that allows preachers to speak out against issues and political campaigns, as well as contribute to political causes. This would, in essence, reverse the Johnson Amendment, allow the preachers the full right of freedom of speech. This new law would allow preachers to become more involved in politics. Okay, that is going to score me the point, or that is going to score me that part of the point. Here's what they put last year. Again, when only that part was the question. They put, Congress can pass a provision of the Johnson Amendment. The provision can allow religious leaders to speak for or against certain candidates. Therefore, the Johnson Amendment can only restrict contributions of money. Okay, that was their answer for that first part. That scored them the point. This person got all the points. It was an example. Obviously, the B is the second part of our A. So you're going to see what they put there. When I went to this part and explained how the provisions could prevent this congressional action, I put, partisan division could play a role in the congressional action by the ideological makeup of Congress. Republicans would be more likely to support a reverse of the Johnson Amendment because of their support of the religious activities. Democrats are more adamant in the separation of religion and government. Since the House of Representatives currently has a Democratic majority, they will be more likely to oppose a reverse of the Johnson Amendment, making its passing more difficult than if it were Republican majorities in both the House and the Senate. Okay, some of this stuff might seem redundant, but again, you're making sure that the reader clearly knows what you're saying. So say everything that you mean. If you think you're like, hey, I feel like I've already said this before, who cares? They're not going to take off because you said something twice, or if you think you said it twice. Remember, the person does not know you. So if I was grading this, there might be a sentence in here that you don't need because I'm like, hey, I know so-and-so knows this. It's okay. They don't know me, so they don't know that person, that I know it. So make sure that you say everything that you're thinking. Okay. So I would get the point for A right there. There you go. B says, referencing the scenario, explain how a restriction imposed by the Johnson Amendment relates to the legal question addressed in the Supreme Court's case of Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. Now, like I mentioned, I went to Schoology, got in the AP Review Materials folder, clicked on the document that created summary of 15 Supreme Court cases, looked it up, read it, just to kind of simulate, like, this is what most people probably would do when you are looking at this case, when you're looking at this question. Now, I know, like, the Supreme Court cases are part of the material we're supposed to cover. The actual question that has to do with the Supreme Court cases has been eliminated. But like I mentioned to a lot of people, I think what they're probably going to do, and these sample questions that were modified for the 2020 test, kind of, I think, almost like confirms my thinking. I think they're going to try to throw like a Supreme Court case as a part of a question. kind of like they've done here for B, just so you have to utilize a Supreme Court case. Or they might make it part of, on the argument essay, what you have, something that you can use. So knowing those Supreme Court cases is going to be good. Reference that folder. That's going to help you a lot. All right, so for B, here's what I put. Now, up until here, actually, let me read it. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission was about the contributions of Citizens United to a movie about the qualifications of then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Citizens United argued that the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act that did not allow interest groups, labor unions, or other organizations to take money out of the general treasury to support political activities was unconstitutional. They argued that it was equal to free speech. Any limits to these contributions was like limiting free speech. The Supreme Court agreed with Citizens United and said it would violate any group's free speech to limit their campaign contributions. Okay? Now, up until this point, I have not answered the question. Now, I've set it up so my answer can be connected. And here, these last couple sentences do that. They connect kind of my answer to how this is going to apply to the scenario that's given. The ruling by the Supreme Court can be applied to the enforcement of the Johnson Amendment. Not allowing these pastors to contribute to political candidates could be seen as a restriction of their freedom of speech, as stated in the Citizens United case. So I kind of connect it to how this applies to the actual pastors. So I set it up, but I also make that connection. You got to actually flat out say it. Otherwise, it's not going to count. Okay. C, I think a lot of people got C. Describe a liberty found in the Bill of Rights that the interest group referenced in this scenario feels is threatened, and then explain how this group might use the judicial branch to try to influence a change in this policy. So the group affected could contend that it was a violation of their freedom of speech. Okay, I think most people probably would have said that and probably would have got that. Just like the case of Citizens United, the pastors could argue before the courts that their freedom of speech is being violated because their voices are restricted by the Johnson Amendment, both literally, the ability to express their opinions from the pulpit, and figuratively with their ability to financially support candidates of their choosing. Citizens United was pretty clear that groups were free to support candidates of their choosing as it equates to freedom of speech. This means that the pastors could use the courts as a means to overturn the Johnson Amendment. So, again, I think this last sentence may be a little redundant. I think I already said it here, but I wanted to make it perfectly clear that that's what I'm saying, that they could take up action in the courts to try to change the Johnson Amendment to get their freedom of speech back. Okay? So this is how you'd answer this. This answer would get all the points on the concept application question. I'd be well on my way to a 5. I've linked in Schoology some examples from last year. Now, they've changed the question. It's not the same question. But again, they're good examples of what they're going to take. The concept application question is a lot more informal. You just obviously write your answer down and you kind of move on with your day. Okay? I'm going to do a video for the argument essay coming up here pretty shortly. So make sure you check that out. That one probably will help you a little bit more than this one would, my guess. So let's do that now. If you have any questions, please email me or stop in office hours and we're going to figure this out. Other than that, have a great day.